Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda.
Okay. This is an opportunity for any members of the public to make comments about items that are not on the agenda. Does anyone wish to make a comment? Seeing none, are there any commissioner comments?
What you should do, well, just what you should do is you should close the public comments before you go to commissioner comments. Otherwise, it's open, and that'd be someone come in an hour from now and make a public comment.
Okay, there will be no more public comments until further notice. I do have a comment about an upcoming event, which is next week. And this would be of interest to Mid-Valley residents. At the BOCC Library on Wednesday, January 29th, from 4 to 7 p.m., there will be a bunch of nonprofit community organizations present there, and it's a chance for citizens to learn about the nonprofit organizations and meet the people involved and ask questions. And I think there's also an opportunity for nonprofit organizations still to sign up to get a table at that event. So next Wednesday, 4 till 7 at the BOCC Library. Okay, looking at the minutes of the work session of November 19th, 2013 and the regular meeting of January 8th, 2014, I'd entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a resolution appointing citizen board members. And the one appointment that is up for approval is for Shayna Miller to be a regular member of the Weed Advisory Board. We interviewed her a couple of months ago.
I would make the motion to appoint her to the Weed Advisory Board.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve Shayna Miller. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the consent actions, first readings. These will be set for public hearing on February 12th. The first one is an ordinance repealing the ordinance number 21-213 and adopting Pitkin County retail marijuana licensing regulations to be added to Title VI of the Pitkin County Code. And John Ely, could you take the floor on this and explain the changes you've made?
Certainly, Steve. Actually, the draft that appears is, for the most part, identical to the last draft that the BOCC reviewed. The areas that have been discussed, particularly by the board in the past at the numerous work sessions and previous adoption of Ordinance 21-2013, which was to establish our local licensing authority, are highlighted in the AIS, in the agenda item summary. The first four sections remained unchanged. They are more administrative than anything else. They establish the local licensing authority and the regime of issuing licenses. The BOCC did discuss particularly that there was to be a limitation on locations availability for dual licensing, either dual licensing as is typically referred to by folks in the marijuana business or industry, the coupling of retail marijuana licensing with medical marijuana licensing, but also different types of retail marijuana licensing licensed activities. For example, the same location cannot be used for cultivation as is used for retail sales or for infused manufacturing of product. Let's see, some other topics that have been discussed is that there is a distance requirement at the time of initial application, but that distance requirement is not carried forward on renewal applications. The distance requirement relates to 1,000 feet from the licensed facility to any educational facility or rehabilitation center. There is criteria for consideration of energy consumption within the review. A renewal application may be processed administratively without a public hearing, provided there are no outstanding issues, either in regards to complaints or suspension of activity in conjunction with the license. There has been language added to specifically prohibit delivery of marijuana or marijuana products for sale outside the licensed location. Language has been inserted to allow for modification of facilities associated with retail marijuana licenses, but not their expansion in size. Pickens County personnel may bring other individuals with them on site inspection visits. And finally, the direction of complaints was made more explicit in that they will be handled by the Pickens County Code Enforcement Officer or the Attorney's Office. In addition to these general topics of prior discussion, I've added a couple of additional issues for the board to consider. The first is not reflected in any language that has been added to the proposed regulations for consideration on first reading. And what that is basically a consideration of whether or not the board would like to continue or to establish a local preference for initial licensees. As the board knows, retail marijuana licenses are not generally available until October of this year, 2014. Currently, the only licensees the only individuals or entities that can apply for retail marijuana licensing are individuals or entities that already hold medical marijuana licenses. And that advantage was established by state law, and it exists until October of this year. It was anticipated, of course, that our regulations would be in place before the end of 2013 and are going to be anticipatedly adopted in February, but perhaps at a different time. There's no commitment by the board to adopt at any one particular point in time. But given that, the advantage for existing licensees in the marketplace tends to be shrunk. So the board may want to consider either a cap on the licenses for some temporary period, say through the end of this calendar year, so that there's an additional 3 months of preference built in to our regulations that has already been established through the state regulation, and we can do that with a cap on licenses, like I said, or simply not allowing anybody to apply for or be available for licensing through the county who does not already have a Pickens County license for medical marijuana, or some other device if the board is desiring to entertain that type of a qualification in the regulation. The other item,
Steve, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
John, so these preferences were established by the state. Do you know what the reasoning behind that preference was?
You know, I don't. My initial assumption was that medical marijuana got off to sort of a stumbling start, and my discussions with people at the Marijuana Enforcement Division led me to believe that they didn't want to repeat that experience, and they wanted to have more of a controlled beginning, and therefore have license requests and applications come in at a more measured and anticipated pace, and therefore licenses for retail marijuana facilities were only going to be available to license holders for medical marijuana facilities for a limited period of time. And it's that, if nothing else, serves to be a choke so to speak, on the number of applications that the state had to process, at least initially, until it was clear what kind of business it was going to be generated, how many applications might be anticipated, and so forth. And the state system also provides an ability for an individual to line up in advance to the ability to get a retail marijuana license if they don't already have a medical marijuana license by expressing their intent to apply with the state. Following that expression of intent, 3 months later you can actually apply for a license, and then 3 months later you can expect one, and that then has a staggered start for people who are entering the industry that aren't previously licensed. And by October 2014, at least at the state regulatory level, that discrimination or preference goes away. The reason I brought it up, quite frankly, is simply because it is an interesting industry to observe, going from the, essentially a black market a type of a setting into an open and regulated and licensed market type of a setting. The startup costs for somebody who is getting into the business are quite high, and the uncertainty is also quite high. And to allow for a preference for the people who are already there, who are already here in our community and we have some familiarity with, to basically carve their niche out in the marketplace can be an advantage for the community and for the people who are trying to set themselves up in the business. If the board wants to recognize that, we can figure out a way, as I said, to try to extend that preference for already licensed local individuals for, say, another 3-month period or something like that.
Rachel?
Michael, an additional reason which I've heard spoken by some of the legislators and other folks is that then they're dealing with known actors, known characters, people who have been following the rules already and are there. So there is a sense of soundness to moving forward that way, instead of a flood of new people that they have no idea how they're going to react with the community or interact with the public.
Now, because the board hadn't discussed this previously, I just offered for consideration. I didn't draft any language into the regulations as they're currently before the board, but we can do that right now if it's the board's desire. The other suggestion for consideration, I did incorporate within this regulation, and it's at section 6.48.100 parens K. And the reason I went ahead and incorporated that was based upon at least discussions
What
of
page are we, John? I'm sorry.
on page
6 of the ordinance.
of the ordinance, correct.
Or
bottom
of
of that
the
page.
rules. I don't know if that's the ordinance.
Of the actual regulation.
Did you say 640?
That would be about 1, 2, 3,
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
about page 9 of the,
Which subsection?
Page 9, and what number?
It's at the bottom of the page, item K.
it's facility requirements.
Okay,
It
page
says
11.
K.
Page 11, okay.
All right?
Yeah, thank you.
The inclusion of this language is a result of a conversation I had with our sheriff, Joe DeSalvo, and the potential for overindulgence, say, in particularly marijuana-infused products. Given that we are a resort community and we have a lot of guests, people coming from a lower elevation will have the same effect as is experienced with alcohol. Even the fact that these days the marijuana products and marijuana that is offered for sale is of strains that are a lot stronger than what a lot of people might be used to or have experienced in their past. There is an anticipated problem that if somebody is consuming an infused product, that not enough time will go by before they wait to have another bite of the gummy bear or the brownie or whatever the product is, and that an unintended consequence is that it will catch up to the consumer, and all of a sudden they're experiencing an effect that's a lot more than what they were anticipating. And so the language that's included in this subparagraph K was designed to deal with that type of concern. It's not really an issue that can be enforced particularly easily, but the requirement is that any individual associated with the actual sales for a marijuana store licensed facility must be familiar with the product that they're selling. They must be familiar with the potency and the expected delay time of when you ingest a product, or even if you're simply smoking marijuana, when you would expect to feel it, so that somebody isn't going out there and over ingesting an amount of particularly infused products, or even smoking the marijuana itself directly and getting a lot more than they bargained for. So to have that type of a criteria is somewhat analogous to the TIPS training that you would expect for alcohol license holders that are in a sales capacity. So those are the two items that the board has not talked about before. One was included in this draft and one was not.
Michael and then George. George and then Michael.
So how would the employees gain this information?
Being familiar with their own product.
Right, so they'd have to be testing and...
Well, the product has to be tested anyway, just for potency, so that it can be accurately labeled. That's a state requirement. But there is a benefit to when a customer is talking to a sales associate or representative to have some ability to converse and say, well, how high is this going to get me, essentially? When can I start to feel this? Should I have and if the person making the sale can say, if you go and you're used to this type of habit in your life, you go have one bite of this and then wait 30 minutes before you do anything else. To have that a bit of knowledge, I think, is highly useful to a consumer.
And then if someone does experience an overdose, is that shop or that employee, are they liable?
Under the regulation, only if the employee or the license holder and their agents or employees did not advise the customer what the product was.
Thank you.
I'm having trouble thinking that it's analogous to TIPS training. Do people in a retail liquor store have TIPS training?
They don't, because they're selling for consumption off premises, and so that's not part of the alcohol licensing.
Well, aren't these particular establishments selling for consumption off premises?
That's true.
So, and TIPS training typically is for a bartender who is serving, and if you step away from the bar, you can start consuming immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never been to a place where the bartender advises you on the potency of the drink you're taking, nor have I asked the bartender what the potency of the drink or the effects would be if I consume this drink. So I just don't see that it's analogous at all. I see that there's a problem, but I'm not sure that it's addressed by Section 648-100-K.
Rachel.
Yeah, I think that is a good start on this. I think that it is, I think Michael's right, it's not any sort of real apples to apples comparison, but it does detail a level of responsibility to the clientele. And what I was thinking is maybe there should be something that's added that's item L or maybe incorporated. But I was thinking that it might be appropriate to require that there be a small flyer, handbill type thing given to everyone with each purchase that reminds people of what the Colorado state laws are. So it would be, no public consumption, no driving high, and you could even detail, in there, a caution if you're not familiar with these products, or however somebody would like to word it, or we would word it. But you could have a You are personally responsible, this is not to be shared, there's no one under 21, something like that. And so I think that would be especially important in a resort community where you're going to have guests who come who are not familiar with Colorado state laws. And, we've already, at least from reading in the newspapers, have seen other communities saying, people kind of think it's a free-for-all. It's not. It's a regulated substance, and it, has responsibilities. As a purchaser, you have responsibilities. You're not able to drive while you're intoxicated on this, and so on. So I think that would be a step forward in. You could probably combine both elements. I still think the personnel should be knowledgeable and be able to discuss this, but if there was a, kind of a flyer that you staple to every bag that goes out that says, these are the state laws, please respect the state laws, could be helpful. I don't know if any other board members would like to add something like that or no.
I think that would be a good addition that would help on the responsibility and the liability also of the store owner in making sure that they've notified their customers about what the rules are. They could also put information about the expected time frame of when a person,
Yeah, or whatever.
or something like that could go on there. It wouldn't necessarily have to, but
That may be a little similar to the Skier Safety Act, so that when you buy a lift ticket, you're acknowledging that you understand the, Skier Safety Act. And I've seen those posted in the, lobbies of the ski areas.
Michael?
Yeah, I still don't see that K is of any relevance, quite frankly. But I think your idea is a good one, and whether or not you have to hand it out with every purchase or just a notice on in the establishment that these are, I think that's probably, since it's a beginning industry, it's probably worthwhile to tell people what their responsibilities are. But I just don't see that there is no such thing as tips training, and we don't know who would administer it, who would teach it, who knows about it, where's the structure for it. So if we find the need for it later, I think we add that. But at this point, all we know is that people have certain responsibilities under the law, and I think we should let them know that for sure.
Steve?
Yeah.
Kind of building off of what you're saying, Michael, I can understand what you're saying, and I do think you could have similar, it's taken a long time, but alcohol bottles now usually have a little teeny thing on them that says, overconsumption can be hazardous to your health, things like that. And, maybe, again, this flyer could have a few basic, that people are responsible for themselves when using this, and these are items you should watch out for, or that there can be delayed reactions, or be sure to understand the potency of the product in which you're purchasing and its potential effects. I just think that, and I'm sure people would lay them out nicely, but a mimeographed sheet of paper is very inexpensive, and people may be purchasing and then taking it back to a larger group of their friends who are all staying at the same condo, and by having it as a handout as opposed to just posted on the wall, the message would get back to the larger group, potentially.
Are all of you all right with adding Section L with language to that effect? Maybe?
Well, I'm fine with Section L. I'm just not fine with Section K. I think we can add that once we get a structure in place. I think, the people who are really going to have to deal with it are safety officers who are going to have to deal with the effects of. They're going to have a hard time recognizing what the hell's going on. And until there's a structure in place for training, I don't think it's necessary. Notification on responsibilities, I think it's fine.
Do you think if we changed K to say that when such training like tips training for alcohol is available, that the employees be required to do that, or should that be added at a later time
I
if
think
and
we
when
have-
such training is available?
You know, as was pointed out earlier, we can have an emergency ordinance at any time, and if we find that we're being challenged by people not knowing what they're ingesting, and we have a structure in place for that training, then I think we can do it by emergency ordinance. I don't think we need it in this particular thing. However, I think notification of people's responsibilities is a good thing to have.
Rachel?
I'm okay leaving K in here. I don't think there's any reason to have to delete it for this to move forward as a reasonable ordinance. You may be right, Michael, that it's hard to say, has it been sufficiently trained? Are you sufficiently familiar? But again, I think that's part of why the state was giving existing facilities more of a head start, because the personnel are trained and are familiar. And at least from what I've been reading in Westward and the Denver Post and other places, there seems to be a lot of discussion that goes on between the purveyor and the customer about, is this good for sleeping? Is this good for pain? Is this good for whatever? And so I just have no problem leaving that in there. I think asking that people have some familiarity with the product they sell, whether it's handguns or, I certainly get advice when I'm buying wine at one of the local liquor shops. Is this good with lamb or is this good with fish? So I don't see any problem there.
Well, the problem I see is that we don't have the structure to do it. So are we going to now start training, I don't know what the acronym would be, but training for who's going to do it? I mean, are we going to then pay for that training? Who's going to do it? There's no structure yet available for that training. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It could be a good idea, but who's going to put the guidelines? Where are the state guidelines? Where are the national guidelines? There's no guidelines. So we're asking to enforce, to have a whole structure for training that's, as it says here, analogous to TIPS training, but nobody knows where it's coming from, what the regulations are. So yeah, it would comfort us to have it, but where is the structure? There is none.
I do see what you're saying. As I say, I just don't see that how we've written it is, we're not saying you have to take a class, or you not have to take a class that the sheriff's office gives, but the potencies are something that's required by the state, and the product needs to be tested. And so, I see this as saying, someone can't say, here, you go have a good time. They have to be able to say, this has certain properties, certain qualities, this is stronger than that, and to at least have some working knowledge of it makes sense. And that's all I think that this is requiring.
My thought is to leave this wording in now, since this is just the first reading, and it will give us all a chance to mull it over for a couple of weeks, and then the members of the public can think about the issue also, and then at our meeting in February, when it's the public hearing, we can hear their thoughts, and in the meantime, we will have thought
That's
more
true.
on it and can amend it at that time.
That's fine.
Okay.
Steve, John has a
Let's see.
I was just wondering if you could give me direction on how you would like the advisement on Colorado laws and individual responsibilities to be conducted, as a display, as a handout to accompany sales, or either or.
Well, both.
Both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would make sense.
I like your idea, Rachel, of having the handout, because a lot of the customers will be out of state and they won't be familiar with Colorado law. And if they have the handout to take to their friends, and it's also a reminder to them to not be giving the product to underage people, which is, part of our responsibility in this new law is to try to enforce that.
Then I would suggest that the board accept this regulation with an addition of a subsection L in that very same section that we're talking about, to read an advisement on Colorado laws and individual responsibility shall accompany every sale of retail marijuana or retail marijuana products and be displayed on the premises of the retail marijuana sales store establishment.
Displayed prominently.
And I assume that we will write the language, that way it's consistent between all the various licensed locations.
Rachel?
Yeah, I was going to say perhaps you could condense those and have a sample with the ordinance 2 weeks from now, because I don't think we want the whole state
No.
thing, but the more germane items.
Yeah.
Okay, George.
I've got comments.
Yeah.
Under, let's see, we're under C number 16, which is, I think, on our page 9, talks about a license for retail marijuana establishments shall not be issued for any type of retail marijuana establishments in the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus area, the Emmett Caucus area. We need to add the Frying Pan Caucus area. That's not in there. We also need to add license for any retail and medical marijuana, because those were those caucus's recommendations as well.
Well, this is just retail. We're
It's
going
just
to bring
retail.
back the medical marijuana
Okay.
regulations.
Okay, so we need to add the Frying Pan. And it says for a period of 1 year following the adoption of these regulations. I think I'd like to see that wording expanded, that that it requires an annual review and recommendations from the caucuses on an annual basis. Because I'm not sure what this is saying for a period of 1 year following, then what happens after that?
Consistent with the board's last discussion on the issue is that the prohibition would simply be lifted.
Yeah, and I don't agree with that. I think that if we're taking into consideration the caucus's concerns and recommendations, that for the first year that we should ask them to review the status of those decisions each year and then bring back those recommendations again for the board to consider, versus just having it. Right now, it looks like it ends after 1 year and then there's no further discussion. I think I would like to see this brought back to the caucuses each year, so they're aware that they have a time frame that they need to resubmit their recommendations to the board as well.
Yeah, I had trouble with the caucuses doing this in the first place because it balkanizes the whole county. So we're going to have regulations. Now we don't have a uniform regulation for the county. We have a regulation that's subdivided then into each caucus district. And although I respect asking for a moratorium for a year to sort of try to digest the implications of marijuana licensing and marijuana consumption and marijuana cultivation and marijuana testing, I think after that year's moratorium, that we should be united in an all-county regulation and not have it balkanize any further. I just don't think it's a workable system to do it that way. So I would disagree with George.
And I guess I know we've had this argument, this discussion in the past, but the caucuses have the opportunity as a home rule charter to, in effect, direct their neighborhoods when it comes to any land use decisions. And some caucuses have actually limited the size of their homes, which is different than other parts of the county. as one good example. Some caucuses have limited commercial enterprises versus the whole county. So I think it's an issue that does not balkanize the county. It's an issue that is why caucuses have been set up as part of our home rule charter to be able to provide direction and determine their own destiny, how they want to see their neighborhoods go forward. So this is just one example, and this is probably the largest example with the most consensus across the board from all these caucuses in terms of their concerns on this issue. So what I'm asking is that we follow this wording, but we just expand it so that at the end of the year that we're able to review this again as well as the caucuses.
Rachel?
You know, I've said this in our work session when we were, dealing with this. I honestly could see making it an 18-month as opposed to 1 year. I think this first year is going to be such a shakeout year and early, progressions. I'm not sure we're going to have that much information. It's kind of like asking for a review of employment in a hotel that's, only been open 5 months out of a year. And I think that it would just be premature. I can support a review after 18 months and see if there's more calm, perhaps would be the right word, about the issue, or more concerns. And so I do agree with George that we have different codes based on the master plans that caucuses have submitted to us. I agree with Michael that caucuses are advisory to the county. They're not a determinant. If it was just a absolutism, we probably would have no essential facilities that the community needs within the county because everyone wants it all somewhere else, wants all the impacts to be somewhere else. So I can see having a review. I don't know why you wouldn't want to, and I think that if you don't have it established as a review, you're just going to have so much clamoring for a review, probably from both sides of the issue, that that we're going to do something ad hoc at that time. And I think it'd be better to have an established date upon which we're going to have a review and have a discussion.
Michael?
Yeah, I can agree with 18 months. I think this process has been a slow process, so anyone who's not informed about it is even slower than our process, which is... So I think a year's moratorium is fine. And you're right, Rachel, the caucuses are advisory, and I think that the adoption of different codes for different parts of the county was a mistake. I've always thought that. And because there are times when things are inappropriate in a caucus district and when they're appropriate. But to have an across-the-board prohibition either on house size or cultivation center or whatever, it's just not, doesn't give the citizenry the ability to make wise decisions. This county isn't based on prohibitions, it's based on the ability to make good decisions. And that when you have decisions that are taken on an individual basis, and you have an evolution of better decision making. You find out that houses should be a certain size. That in some places they can be smaller, in some places they can be larger, and the effects are negligible. And I think the same thing happens in this particular case. The caucuses will always have the ability to review this kind of thing, and that's what they should hold on to. But the idea of governing, of actually governing their caucus areas, that's up to us, not the caucus. The caucus is there to advise us. So that's why I think it's not a good idea to balkanize the county.
Okay, so if I withdraw my request for an 18-month for the first review, would you support the 1 year?
Well, 1-year moratorium, that's what has been asked for
Okay.
by some
And then a
caucus
review.
areas.
And then a review, I mean,
Well, then if it just follows procedures, which is, there'll be some land use reviews, there'll be some public notice licensing reviews, and that's available to the caucuses and to all citizens of the county.
Yeah, I have a real problem with that. And we have a land application that's come before us, we're going to see it again, and that applicant has applied in a certain area because they felt that they were told that this area does not have any objections in place for a growth site. Now, if they knew that there are certain areas that have objections to a growth site, they're going to save themselves and the neighbors a tremendous amount of money and time. And so if you wait for each individual application to come before each caucus, you're just going to exacerbate an issue that could have been resolved earlier. Similar to if someone thinks they want to build a large home, 10,000 square foot home, they know that they're not going to be purchasing property in the Snowmass Capitol Creek area, in the Emma area, or the Frying Pan area. It's just going to save a lot of time. So all I'm suggesting is that we just, after the year of this moratorium, that we have the opportunity, that the caucuses have an opportunity to be aware that the year has come to the end, and they need to, again, revisit their recommendations, and then bring forth any new or different recommendations to the BOCC for the BOCC to consider, just like we're doing now.
Steve? First, I want to say I think we're using the term moratorium inappropriately in this ordinance. Moratorium is a specific type of action. It is a prohibition, and that stands for 1 year as these are written. So I want to clear that up. And I can support what George is saying. I mean, again, we've already heard from the caucuses. The feelings seem to be quite strong. I don't think it's something that you want people constantly having to respond, oh, we just had the hearing on that one and told them no, and now there's another hearing on another 2, and now there's another 3, and having the citizens have to be under this constant, on edge about are there new applications coming in for something that we may or may not want in our community. And I think it may give some of the operators an opportunity to really have some dialogue with the caucuses and to talk to the caucuses, or to offer caucus members tours of other facilities, and to create that familiarity and to establish fully their reputation as diligent and conscientious business people. And so again, I guess the language I'm feeling we need to find in this item number 16 is the review language, that until the review has been complete, there still shall not be any change in the ordinance, that it's for 1 year or until the board changes the rules within those areas subsequent to a review. Maybe John can help with some language.
I would suggest that the decision point is whether or not to have a prohibition expire after 1 year or not. I wouldn't set up a regulation, certainly not within the body of the regulation itself, to create an affirmative duty by the board to take a step at some particular time, simply because the day-to-day business of the board might take you away from it, and that has an unexpected effect at times for an established regulation. So I would either leave the paragraph the way it is, or delete the last portion of it, which reads for a period of 1 year following the adoption of the regulations. Either leave that language there or delete it. And that way, after a year, or as soon as the board is ready to, we can bring the matter back up in front of the board and advertise it, and let caucus representatives appear in front of the board and we can discuss it, consistent with whatever the board's schedule is. The only real reason to put the year in there is if it is something that will happen automatically, so that we don't have to worry about scheduling something on the board's calendar. It's after a year, boom, it's done, and then we'll entertain applications for those areas. So that, to me, that's the real decision point, is either to have that language in or take it out.
And you were talking about the very last sentence.
The last part of the last sentence that reads, "for a period of 1 year following the adoption of these regulations."
Well, I'd be comfortable taking it out and then advising the caucuses that, two things. One is any caucuses that have not made any recommendations, are they under any timeline when they need to do that?
There's no, by not putting a timeline in there, there is no timeline. The board's free to do whatever the board wants to these regulations at any time. And so if you want to establish a prohibition next month or next year or 2 years from now, you can do that, or lift one, whichever way.
That also allows caucuses, if for some reason that they find that perhaps there is an operation that they would accept, they're not tied into, they can come back and say, with a different recommendation.
Well, the regulation is what the regulation is until the BOCC changes it. So if, for example, snow cap, if they wanted to come back with a different recommendation, they can make that, but their prohibition is in effect until the board lifts it. If you want to have it available for evaluation or comment on an application-by-application basis, then there really shouldn't be a prohibition at all, simply a referral process to the caucus and comment back, and then a review of each application.
I mean, my understanding was that there was a year prohibition, so people could understand what the implications of cultivation side was, of retail side, and testing side, all the various permutations of this new law. And they were going to try to consider those permutations over the course of that year. That's what they wanted. And that's what we're prepared to grant them. And I think by keeping the year in place, they have the ability now to rest comfortably with the new law, to thoroughly analyze it for their particular caucus, and come back and make some recommendations before the end of that year. So I think that's the way it should be. That's the way it was originally intended.
My thought, oh, go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
No.
You know, given the options presented by our attorney in the discussion here, I'm going to recommend, or I would support leaving it as it is for a period of 1 year following the adoption of the regulation. Michael's correct. You know, almost every caucus came back to say for 1 year, as opposed to forever, or as opposed to 6 months or 18 months or anything like that. So it's just going to be incumbent on us to create the workspace and the time in the kind of beginning of January of 2015 to have that review, and in a timely fashion either extend or allow it to fully go away. So I'll leave it as it is.
My personal thought is what I would like to see eventually, sometime down the road, because this is still a moving target, the idea of having the year where wait and see kind of a year to let the dust settle on the new law and the new ordinance and see how it's working, and then at some point in time I think everybody will have a lot more knowledge about marijuana regulation and the whole process and what the impacts or lack of impacts are on a neighborhood. And at that point, or some point down the road, I'd like to see it just be a referral on a land use application if someone wants to, or on a marijuana application as opposed to a land use application. Then that would be referred to the caucuses. Because it's such a new area, that's why I agree that the 1 year thing is a good idea. And we can review it in a year's time. That, to me, that would be fine to see, it might take a few years for people to get used to this whole new industry, or above-ground industry. The industry's been here for a long time. It's just as an above
board.
a visible thing now because it's legalized. George?
In a sense, it's not that new because medical marijuana has been in the state for several years. And the issues that caucuses have with retail are very similar with medical. In fact, there were several caucuses that were not interested in having any medical marijuana dispensaries or grow sites in their caucuses, and the BOCC honored those requests and they moved forward. And I don't think there was a timeline under those.
That's correct.
So there was an opportunity for caucus either opt in or opt out. And I would like to see, however that was worded, to have a similar opportunity for caucuses to either opt in or opt out. And to date, there's been 3 caucuses that have opted out. If this wording still allows that to happen, so that at the end of a year, we're able to have another discussion and we're able to engage the caucuses again and hear their concerns and their recommendations and take them under consideration just like we did this time, then I'm comfortable with that. But we have some history already. So it's not that new for caucuses in terms of their issues and concerns. The only other question I have on this, which perhaps I didn't state clearly, was if another caucus wishes to opt in or opt out, we would just be able to add them into this section very easily. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that, George, because I know we've received a number of different email submissions from the Woody Creek Caucus, and they had comments related to the greenhouses predominantly, but I think that whatever recommendations they have recently made to us, we need to make sure those are incorporated to the extent they affect this.
Yeah, and I
don't know about other
Well,
caucuses.
the caucus itself hasn't talked about it. There's a planning committee. There's a
the
planning commission,
has, okay.
which is just an
small
advisory body, and it consists of 3 or 4 people. So I'd wait until the caucus itself. And also, the governing structure of the Woody Creek Caucus is different from the governing structure of these other caucuses, inasmuch as there's not a board that governs it and makes decisions for the greater caucus. The quorum at a Woody Creek Caucus meeting is 2 people, and they can make decisions for the caucus on that basis. So you could have a recommendation from the Woody Creek Caucus one month, and then when 2 people the following month show up, they could make a recommendation that's completely opposite. So it's a more volatile structure than the structures that the governing boards of these other caucuses. So I would take that into consideration also.
So that I'm clear, so are we leaving the language in or excising it?
I'm for leaving it in.
In
I'd be for leaving it in also.
I will do my best then to tickle it, and hopefully it'll be afforded some time on the board's calendar, and we can notice that to all the caucuses, and they can come in and discuss it, and we'll go that way.
all right.
Oh, go ahead, George, if you had other items.
I have another item. We're off this item?
Well, one more, just to clarify, and you had mentioned, the only 2 caucuses are mentioned in our existing wording. So are we adding, Frying Pan Caucus made an official statement?
Yes.
Yes,
So they should be added.
okay.
The Woody Creek was just not the full board? Is that correct, Michael?
they don't have a board, as I just explained. They have a planning commission,
So the Planning Commission recommended, but not the full caucus
full
yet.
board. Now, the planning commission, the purpose of the planning commission is actually to review land use applications and then they make recommendations to the caucus itself. Typically, it depends, but sometimes they make their desires known directly to the county because the spacing between the caucus meetings is so long that whatever subject they're talking about is over with by the time the next caucus meets. So that's the confusion there.
Okay.
And I think, again, just when I asked that clarifying question to John, is this still provides the opportunity for any caucuses to provide a recommendation to the board, either opt in or opt out. So, for example, I know the Crystal River Valley Caucus hasn't had a chance to meet with a quorum yet, and at some point they will, and they'll make a recommendations to us. So this allows that to happen.
Well, in this instance or any other instance, the regulations can be amended by the board consistent with the way the board amends any other code provision, land use or otherwise regulatory provision in the Pickens County Code as a whole.
I've got another topic.
Yeah, George, bring up the new one.
Just on the one before that, number 15, the expected energy consumption of any proposed facility. And I don't know if staff has really, I know we talked about looking at some sort of energy consumption use when we had our discussion on greenhouses, but we haven't really had that discussion here on these facilities. And so would we try to define an energy budget similar to that we have with homes? And if so, would we then have to have a mitigation plan similar to homes vis-a-vis a rent program, or
you can do any of those things. We don't have an energy budget profile to consider or to impose upon a prospective licensee. So what we have is this language, which is the expected energy consumption of any proposed facility, which is simply a criteria that the board can consider when deciding whether or not to issue a license. If the board, considering a licensed facility, feels that the energy consumption is too great, that can be utilized as a decision point to deny a license.
so why would we have a similar system that we do with homes?
Well, homes are a use that's allowed by right in most of the county, and so therefore they are available for a mitigation regime. And this is not a use that's allowed by right anywhere. It's a licensed activity. And because we simply I don't have any information upon to base what the energy consumption should be or should not be if this is too high or that's really good.
The REM program also is kind of external energy use to the house as opposed to internal in the greenhouse. I like where it is, and if there's a way to increase the efficiency or incentivize greater efficiency in the future going forward, that's okay. I think we're seeing, a very narrow region or area in which these licenses may be allowed in the future, and I don't want to be putting additional burdens on to the very limited areas. I think energy costs are something that every business person tries to contain for obvious reasons. It's part of your bottom line, and I don't want to start suddenly getting into a new discussion about whether they have to or can't have solar on top of their greenhouse or beside the greenhouse. Will be solar glare and these sort of things. I think that's just part of the land use application should it be a larger grow facility type item. I don't know that it would be an issue at all per se in the retail outlets, but I don't want to just be piling on here.
Michael?
So I think George is talking about greenhouses, and Rachel referred to greenhouses. So are we also talking about a retail establishment that's in a building where we're asking for their energy consumption too?
This is left the blank for just a proposed facility, which would include any of the 4 potentially licensed facilities. If you're looking at a retail establishment, to be honest with you, can't imagine the energy consumption for a retail establishment to be anything greater than any office space, to be honest with you. But I don't know that personally, so I can't advise the board on that one way or the
Yeah,
other.
I mean, I think what we were trying to get at was the greenhouses, at least that's my recollection, not the retail side, any more than we asked for the energy consumption of our liquor store, right? I mean, we don't. Nor do we have energy budgets established for any houses. We have some criteria for energy use, but not an energy budget. So this is, this doesn't work for me really at all, unless it's in some way more specific.
I see this wording being okay. It allows us to use it as a review criteria, and we could put conditions on an application if we think it's not energy efficient enough, but it gives us something to look at without putting a huge burden on the applicant, like Rachel was suggesting, that requiring them to do X, Y, and Z. But when they see that as a criteria, that would also make them think about it too in coming up with their application. Are there any other points that the board
I
wants
have a
to
couple
bring?
of George's. Okay. Page 5 of the ordinance, item 6.48.090, signs. Now, this might be a little for Lance as well as John. On the retail establishments, should there be any, what does the sign code limit sizes of commercial signs to? So I'd imagine if there's an establishment, it would also relate to the existing sign code.
Basically, 6 square feet is the maximum that anybody gets in Pitkin County.
Okay, do we have a materials standard on that?
Just lighting, we have lighting standards. We don't allow,
Neon?
yes, but we don't have material standards.
Okay, and then would lighting 24 hours a day, is that allowed or prohibited? I mean, I'm trying to think, if the establishment closes at 10 p.m., their lights are on all night on the sign, or yes or no, or?
We don't prohibit signs being lit from the outside. You can't have an interior lit sign, but if somebody has for instance, in the ABC, if someone has a sign in the yard, they can have spots on that as long as they want. We don't restrict that.
Just want to know what, do we need, they're already referred back to the sign code for looking at their signs. Okay. Then the second question I have, John, it's more about the recommended action at the end of page 3. Approve regulations on first reading and set for adoption and public hearing on February 12, 2014, and direction to staff to rewrite the medical marijuana regulations consistent with these regulations to be brought back to the BOCC for consideration. I'm supportive of that direction, and so I'm just wondering what is the timing of that, because that would need a first and a second reading to incorporate that, and what is your perception of the path? We'll finish these in February and then start, or we should start with a first reading of those sooner so that then they can be rolled in?
I was going to wait until this was adopted, and so I incorporated that as part of the ordinance that would be adopted and an anticipated date of February the 12th.
Okay.
And the reason is just because then these are finalized and we have something that's set and can be built off of.
Okay. And so when would you anticipate the first reading of the ordinance to roll in the medical marijuana into the same licensing code?
I would think no later than 30 days, and as long as the board's schedule an agenda accommodated it.
Okay. Well, I would just like to say I want to make sure that that really does move apace, considering that later in our packet we have a moratorium special ordinance that others had voted for before. So I do want to see that moving apace. And I think it's good for the consistency between the two different types of programs to have the same rules.
There will be obviously some differences
Some
simply
small.
because it's a different product and a different regulatory regime, but to the extent that they can be consistent, that's what we'll do.
I think that one of the primary differences is that the board is looking to the idea that there would be hearings before this board for all medical marijuana licenses for grow or sale, and that it would not be something that people could say, hey, it's by right, I have agricultural land. That each facility on all land would be licensed the same for medical as recreational. Thank you.
John, does the medical include caretaker regulations too?
Caretakers under Colorado law do not need to be, as long as they're operating as such, do not need to be specifically licensed.
So we're not going to deal with the issue of caretakers?
No. Any more than we will deal with the issue of personal consumption.
I believe the state is looking at maybe reviewing the caretaker regs at some level, from what I've read. Primarily, they're looking at limiting the number of patients a caretaker can have, now that there's greater availability. Would you accept a motion?
There's one other item that we have not really talked about, and that's the first decision point that John mentioned, whether we want to have preference for local businesses or to have a temporary cap on the number of licenses. And we have not discussed that. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I asked a question of John on that issue, and John tried to elucidate why that regulation was in place in terms of the state. I don't see that unless we come up with our own set of reasons that we need to change it at all.
Yeah, I kind of hark back again to the work sessions we had in 2013 at the end of the year on this, and there was a lot of discussion about the market, market forces supporting or not supporting X number of licenses. And given that the board does have the authority to deny licenses, I think, based on our discretion as opposed to any other criteria of the needs of the community have been served, I don't see the need for the cap either. That was our work session discussion, that it was just going to kind of shake out. I know what you're saying because we did not get this passed by January 1st. But at the other hand, should we be successful in passing this and then beginning the reviews in February, I think that still gives folks a pretty significant 6-month advantage in the marketplace, and I'm willing to go with that. And that's the state rate overarching what we do locally. So I don't see need for additional measures on that. And when we talked about in the work session, it's like, well, what are we going to say? I mean, and I asked some trustees from Carbondale, how did you guys come up with 5, 5, 5, and 5? And they said, pulled it out of thin air, basically. So I don't know what the justification, whether 3 would be the right number or 13 would be the right number. And I think we need to see what market demand is and take a look.
Or apart from a cap, that's just one way to skin the cat, perhaps. If you want to extend the preference, you can just simply say something to the effect that retail marijuana licenses are only available to existing medical marijuana licensees until
A certain
2
date.
months past October 1st, December 1st, 2014, or make it even in January 1st, 2015, or something, some arbitrary date that is only designed to allow local or already licensed individuals have an advantage.
Yeah.
Just to broaden the conversation, how many existing medical marijuana licensed dispensaries and grow facilities do we currently have in Pickett County?
6.
6 of each, or?
No, 6 total.
6 total. How many are dispensaries and how many are grow sites? 2 and 4 or something?
1 dispensary only.
1 dispensary only?
2.
2 dispensaries?
2 dispensaries. Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Bay
I'm
ABC
sorry.
and
Yep,
Holland
yep,
Hills.
down in Holland Hills, right.
So 2 and 4 grow facilities?
Right, and actually, there are 2 infused, or under the medical marijuana regime,
Manufacturing.
it's a different nomenclature than in infused products manufacturing, but that type of process. And 1 pending.
1 pending.
My one concern would be if a big, like a Front Range operation who has 100,000 square feet of grow operation over there wanted to come in the valley and set up a business, or if someone from Southern California wanted to set up a business, or, some outside interests that we don't know them, they'd be a new big player, and they could totally overwhelm the small
Well, you wouldn't have to
local businesses that we already have.
You wouldn't have to worry about a Southern California player simply because you have to be a resident of Colorado to hold a license. But in just reviewing other instances of activity or enterprises or industries that become available in an open market setting, it's not unusual to anticipate the more heavily funded entities to try to cut prices in a significant way to drive out competition, such that they are left in a singularity or a monopoly spot, and then increase the price. And so, you can see that in a lot of different instances, and whether that would happen here, who knows. The only thing that I can say for sure is that the startup costs for a marijuana establishment are significant, and either you want to allow the activity or you don't, ultimately. And if the regulations or the costs are too prohibitive, or if the product, as a consequence, that nobody wants to do it, or if somebody is engaged in the enterprise and the product, as a consequence, gets too expensive, the black market will continue to flourish, and status quo will be preserved. And the status quo is grow sites in Humboldt County and Juarez and wherever else, and a market that's not regulated openly.
I'm willing to just let the state procedure stand and go from there. If we, for some reason, see a need to do something else before the October date, we have that opportunity. But I'm not going to anticipate that need now to extend it further than the state's rules.
Okay. Steve, one other thing that I forgot to mention on the very last page of the packet is the regulation pertaining to operating fees. The board discussed these and discussed ideas of changing the parameters. They were left consistent with the board's last discussion. I wasn't sure if you wanted to review those again or not. The number of $5,000 per license is essentially a copy, on my part, off of the regime of the City and County of Denver. And at the time I drafted this, the City and the County of Denver, in my opinion, was the entity that was having the most discussion on regulations and moving the fastest forward. But it does not particularly relate to anything else. And it is one of those factors that tends to make the operation of the enterprise expensive from an initial point of view. And it's more of a policy discussion for the board as to what the level of that operating fee should be, or higher, lower, a different regime, 1 fee per license holder, regardless of the number of licenses, or or whatever. And we talked about that in the past, and the only reason I'm bringing it up now is I wasn't 100% sure if the board had concluded that discussion or if you wanted to revisit that.
No, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, if indeed this new structure is to mainstream all of these operations and to bring this operation into daylight, I think we should reduce the fees. You know, this whole thing has been seen certainly by the state as a way of overtaxing an enterprise that they're sure people are going to be consuming. And I just think that was the wrong approach. I think if a sales tax is set by the county at 9%, that's what the sales tax should be on this particular item. The fees here are $5,000 for a fee, and is that an annual basis?
It's a one-time only.
One time only. It should be lower and more in line with the fees we charge other operations. So I'd propose a much lower fee, tops $1,000, and stop looking at this as sort of some sort of way of capitalizing on this. And I think that this is just unreasonable at $5,000.
Rachel?
You know, Michael, I don't think it's unreasonable. I can see lowering it some. I think 1,000 would be unreasonable on the other end of things. You know, we've always had a philosophy that development pays its own way, and this is a form of development. I think there are going to be additional costs through our sheriff's office and trying to work with the school districts. There was a good article in the Aspen Daily News today about the community conversation that has begun. We do not know what the enforcement costs will be going forward, and you know, there is an obligation on the public health, safety, and welfare. I think that as expensive as it is to begin this business, there seems to be quite a bit of success through the medical industry, and a number of medical facilities are seeing enough of a profit margin to really want to expand into recreational. You know, I think anywhere where it's allowed, there seems to be enough of a market, and so you know, I could see lowering it to 4,000 and go from there. But if we currently have 6 and 4 are and they're licensed at 4,000, that would be about $24,000 to help support the sheriff's office and the ongoing efforts that we're going to have.
Michael?
Well, that may be the case, Rachel, but I think if you were to make that case, you'd make the same case for alcohol consumption. And the cost of our liquor licenses,
It varies depending on the different types of licenses.
it varies. Does it vary between $5,000 and $10,000?
No.
It's less than that.
Right.
Right. So I think the cost to the county in terms of alcohol consumption, in terms of the number of premises here and the amount of alcohol consumed in this county and the amount of alcohol that's promoted in this county, that's where the costs lie. And to put the entire burden on consumption of marijuana now, to be fair about it, you'd have to raise all those license fees for alcohol premises, for bars, for whatever. So indeed, it might be an extra burden, but we can revisit again if it is an extra burden. If we can somehow show that marijuana consumption has increased the costs to the public safety of the county, then at that point we can increase it to try to offset that. But I just don't see it happening ahead of time, and I wouldn't anticipate it to happen ahead of time. So I don't agree with that. I think a reasonable level is at $1,000.
George?
John, do we know the fees that the city is charging for retail establishments?
An operating fee? No, I do not, sorry.
It'd be
They
interesting-
had discussion going back and forth and just
It'd
recently.
be interesting to find that information out. I would be comfortable leaving this as it is for second reading, getting some more information, we got further discussion.
Yeah, I was just thinking along the same lines. I mean, it may be justification to lower this further. It may be to Michael's level of 1,000, it might not. You know, I would just, you know, add a footnote. The regulation of alcohol has been established for quite a period of time now, and this is brand new. And if we were just dealing with the end of alcohol prohibition and reestablishing the regulations for alcohol, I'm not sure we would just, you know, be as casual about that either. But this is, you know, so there's no direct comparison with the two. And I think that there's a little bit of a myth out there that people choose marijuana because it's safer than alcohol. But I don't know that people don't indulge in both substances at the same time, and you might have a compounding of the safety issues associated with alcohol. So I'm willing to leave it as it is, and I'd love to see what the licensing fees are in Carbondale. Local, you know, anywhere around here, and make a judgment at that time.
You know, and in a sense, it's also somewhat comparable to the land use application fees, that there is some staff time involved in that, and that
Yes.
amount of time it would take our staff to process this could come into play also. And
Application fees, actually, Steve, are covered separately. This would
The
just be for additional.
okay, so there's a separate application fee. Okay. Okay, I would entertain a motion now on this.
Yeah, one last comment. I'd love to have the average salary of a sheriff's officer for information as we're deciding these fees. You know, if we had, you know, would this raise 1/3 the cost of one officer is working 40 hours a week, or 1/2? I mean, just some sort of basis so we can look at the benefits we may have for the enforcement activities and this public safety.
How about instead of that,
Okay.
we look at the cost of a call?
Okay, yeah, I mean, however you'd like to.
That might be more reflective as a
More
response.
reflective. But you know, I do think that the proportionality, to my mind, is that our general fund of the county is not absorbing new costs, and that we are able to adequately and safely regulate it for health, safety, and general welfare. I would make a motion, or are we on here? To approve an ordinance repealing ordinance number 21-2013 and adopting Pitkin County retail marijuana licensing regulation to be added to Title VI of the Pitkin County Code as Chapter 6.48 as amended at the table at this time.
Is there a second?
There's no second, it dies.
I can't second it. can
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Second.
I will second it. Any further discussion? George?
Yeah, I'm not going to support this. I still believe that along with the vast majority of the counties in Colorado, the vast majority of the cities and municipalities in Colorado, the fact that, frankly, that the state legislation, when Amendment 64 passed, they were in such a quandary in terms of even trying to come up with the ideas of where to begin. I believe that was one reason that they passed the discretion on to the municipalities to let local governments try to figure out how to deal with a lot of these issues. The state, as Rachel has said, the state legislation is currently looking at reviewing some changes in the medical marijuana after a few years because some new issues have come up. And I think this is premature. I think that it would be good for us to sit out a year, look at some of these issues. As Rachel again alluded to, there is a concern in the community. There seems to be a need, a request from some community leaders to have some broader discussions on some of these issues. We've seen some concerns and issues arise from the airport, from the Sheriff's Department, from Aspen Valley Hospital, from the schools. And I think it would be valuable to have this year to have some good community dialogue, address some of these issues and some of these concerns on both sides of the table, so everyone has a better comfort level and understanding in terms of what this means for our public safety concerns, for our young kids and young adults as we move forward. So it's as we have seen here, I recall when this first came up last summer that the comments were, oh, this should be simple, we'll just come up with some rules and regulations, will be done in a heartbeat. Well, we've found out that it's not the case. Each of these questions that we've discussed have led to further questions. So it's a complicated issue. It's one that has not really been fully figured out by the local citizens as well as the local governments. Pickett County is going to see an influx of applications for not only dispensaries but for grow sites and testing facilities because no one else in this valley is allowing it in terms of unincorporated counties. Garfield County is not allowing it. Eagle County is not allowing it. Eagle County is taking a temporary ban so they can have further discussions with their citizenry and to discuss some of these issues. So I'm not sure why we're putting Pickett County, unincorporated Pickett County, in to be a guinea pig and to try to resolve some of these issues and have to deal with the impact it's going to have on our community.
Yeah, I am going to support moving this forward. I think it's important in a timely fashion. The review of caretakers at the state, should someone introduce a bill, is more about adjusting to the changing marketplace because there's recreational marijuana fully legalized now in our state. I'm going to be brief. I think we've had 3 work sessions on it, and now we've started our public hearings. That doesn't point to unduly complex matters. I can think of significant more more work sessions we've had on any number of items that were of importance to us. And I think that not moving forward means a tacit support for a continuing and expanding black market that is not regulated, that is not safeguarded. And so I just, I can't move in that direction that for all the visitors who may be coming to Colorado with that impression that it's a legal substance in Colorado and I'd like to try some while here. And by the way, Pickett County would like you to buy it on the black market because we've tried to restrict vigorously the rollout of this in our community. So I am going to support this.
Michael?
Yeah, for me, it's not an endorsement of the consumption of marijuana at all. It's simply a bureaucratic effort at trying to have some regulation about it. But it's also, it seems to me, we're faced with a challenge. And there are counties that can't face that challenge. Eagle County can't face that challenge now. Garfield can't face that challenge now. But I think Pickett County has a history of facing challenges. And this is one we can face. The community dialogue is not shut off by us adopting licensing. In fact, I would expect the community dialogue to increase and to be more informed by the licensing as a framework for what we're going to do in Pickett County. And because we have the powers of emergency ordinance, if that dialogue reaches certain conclusions, we can respond to that by emergency ordinance. So I expect the county to continue to have a dialogue about it. They've had opportunity up to this point to have dialogue about it. We've had numerous work sessions which were attended, but not heavily attended, certainly not by most members of the community. Some community members with self-interest attended. But so let's go ahead. Let's face that challenge. Let's show counties how this is done. And let's adopt some sort of regulation.
Well, a few decades ago, a former Board of County Commissioners tackled land use issues here in this county. And they took bold steps then. They created the growth management plan and the land use code. And the land use code's been amended many, many times since then to improve it, to tweak it. And I see the same thing would happen to these regulations, that as time goes on, as we learn more, we have the opportunity to amend these regulations that we have. I think our country made a mistake a long time ago when marijuana was made illegal. There's evidence that it was made illegal because of a paper company wanted hemp to be made illegal, so it would give the paper company, the pulpwood industry, an advantage over the hemp industry, and therefore they made marijuana illegal. The history of this whole thing, it should never have been done, and I think it's high time that we take a bold step forward, pass these regulations. We'll be looking at them, people will be commenting on them, but we have to start somewhere, and we've put a lot of effort into getting these regulations to this point, and they're probably not perfect, and they probably will be changed as we go along, but I say let's pass them today and proceed forward. So I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, thank you. Does the board want to take a little break now, or should we try to get forward to the beginning of the land use hearings? And
I would like to at least get through the consent action and consent public hearing here.
okay, let's see if we can get through more of the agenda and get up to the land use hearings, and we'll take a break then. Okay, the next agenda item is a resolution approving a grant agreement with the State of Colorado Department of Local Affairs to fund the Pickens County Best and Brightest Intern using funds from the Energy and Mineral Impact Assistance Program. John?
Yeah, and this is an item that we've talked about during budget and such. The county was successful in obtaining a grant through the Department of Local Affairs in a partnership with the University of Colorado School of Public Affairs to retain an intern for a 2-year period. And the intern is a all but done graduate student. In our case, we were able to attract an intern that has a master's in urban and regional planning and is completing her master's in public administration on top of that. We have to execute certain documents with the Colorado Department of Local Affairs in order to receive the funds. They do pay for half of the intern's costs, up to $17,500 a year. These were funds that were anticipated in our 2014 budget and in 2015 in our 5-year plan, and that intern has started. Because this is with another governmental agency, it's considered an intergovernmental agreement to accept these funds, and so we need a resolution of the board authorizing the chair to sign agreements, and also there will be some subsequent paperwork for reporting that are associated with those grants in the future.
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, John. Next is a resolution for a memo of understanding with 2014 and 15 State Fiscal Year Colorado Works Program and Colorado Child Care Assistant Program.
Steve, Nan had a schedule conflict, so I agreed to address this on first reading. If there are detailed questions from the board, they may be better answered upon second reading. But what is in front of you today is a memorandum of understanding. It's required by a Colorado revised statute for implementation of the Colorado Works Program and the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program. Both of these are primarily federally funded through the Temporary Aid to Needy Families, TANF dollars. The MOU is a new document that was developed in cooperation with counties, the state, and advocate groups. It is fairly general in nature as you read it in terms of the obligations of both entities. The significant change is really to start to shift the outcome measures or start to shift the measures of the program to more of an outcomes orientation. The only required measure that you'll see in the MOU is the workforce participation rate, which is a measure, appears to be a rather complicated one, but put simply, it is a measure of the participation from the families who are receiving temporary aid in workforce activities. A lot of the reforms from 1996 were aimed at getting recipients of TANF dollars engaged in the workforce, and the federal government and states have been working on improving what exactly those measures are. This just obligates us to stick with the federal measurements of workforce participation.
I would move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? I have one point I wanted to bring up. It lists the 2-year term of the MOU starting July 1st, 2013. Does that mean that this is already in effect and we're just retroactively approving it? Or?
You know, I have the same question marked on mine, and I believe that this is going retroactive because of the discussions that were ongoing and that the 2-year term matches the federal fiscal years. So obviously we were not obligated until we signed on to the MOU, but we will be obligated to look backwards to that time frame for applying that workforce participation rate.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Approving? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you, John, and I'm sure we can ask Nan further questions, and she will know the answers.
Yes, she will.
Okay, moving on to consent public hearings. There's a special event liquor permit from Bus to Show, and Jeanette Jones, and applicant, could you come sit at the table up here?
Hello.
The microphone doesn't amplify in the room, but it just helps for the television to record your voice.
Gotcha.
So you don't have to talk. It will hear you. Jeanette, do you want to introduce this?
Sure. What we have before you today is an application submitted by Bus to Show for a special event liquor permit to be held on the 24th and the 25th to coincide with the X Games. And these two young men who are over 21, check that out, are representing the applicant today. And also, Mike Kramer is here if you have any questions for him, because there will be a separate, I think there is going to be signed, a separate special event permit, which allows them to have their party. So I'll turn it over to them, and if you have any,
Okay.
I'm sorry, George.
I have a process question, because this application is for a special event January 24th, Today's January 22nd. I'm assuming that the applicants have gone through some expense in terms of setting this up, advertising, et cetera. So I'm just wondering why this wouldn't have come to us earlier in case we had some concerns or questions, or if, in fact, for whatever reason, this would be denied.
Yeah. The reason for that is they did have a sponsor, a nonprofit sponsor, who, after my research, and that took some time, didn't qualify because they weren't in good standing with the Secretary of State's office. So they talked to their other option of another nonprofit. And then we had to have a 10-day posting and a 10-day notice in the paper. And so we had to get the nonprofit in line before we could do that.
And is that nonprofit listed in here?
Bus to show.
Bus to show.
Well, that's the name of the nonprofit? I've never heard of that before. That's a local nonprofit?
They operate out of Boulder in the Front Range, but they do business in Pickens County, or have been here multiple times.
We've done a special event liquor license for this organization in the past?
No, this is the first one.
So it's a nonprofit, not locally here. We've never done any business with them, but as far as we know, they've not had any issues with the Secretary of State.
No, they do not have any issues. And I did check on another special event that they have held in Denver, and they were in good standing there. There were no issues. And I did check with, I'm sorry, Rachel, the state of Colorado, even though they're out of our county, they do qualify for a special event liquor license in Pickens County.
Rachel?
Well, I was wondering, what is the nature and the work of the Bus to Show nonprofit?
Effectively what they do is their mission statement is to reduce intoxicated driving by providing transportation to high-risk events, essentially, and spreading awareness. They did, this last year, they moved 14,000 people in the Front Range, and they do things in Frisco, Breckenridge, Aspen, that sort of deal. And it is, they have like donor members that contribute, but they also do offer rides to everybody.
And so the rides are free, or
Well,
is there a cost?
they offer them, it is kind of like priority based on donorship, but they do kind of take a loss effectively, so they do events kind of like this and things like that to help raise the money and get their costs in line.
Okay. If I can continue, what is the maximum occupancy of the Airport Business Center location?
We're rated for 300.
At the Aspen Brewing Company is rated for 300 people?
Yes, we've spoken with Brian Paul, and also Brian Nichols. Yeah.
And who are they?
That's
the building
Brian
inspector?
Paul's our chief building inspector, and Brian Nichols, I assume, from the Aspen Fire District.
Fire District? Yeah. And where will the people park who are coming to this event? I mean, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, we've been through all of these concerns with the fire marshal as well. And basically what we have done we've done very limited promotions on this, especially up to this point, having this be a little bit of a loose end to tie up. But on all of our promotions that we have done, we've said no parking, ride the bus. We also have two 16-passenger vans that will be doing runs to and from Aspen as well.
Both of which are CDL insured. We have CDL insured drivers, and that's obviously that's like something that we're paying for.
Perhaps give me an overview of how the event's going to run, and for the public too that don't have our memos. When it's going to start, when's it going to end, how many people you anticipate?
So the reason we're throwing this party is this is such a different weekend. This X Games is, we get 50,000 people here instead of our normal 20,000. A lot of them are young kids. They're coming here for a perceived party. It's very different from a normal Aspen weekend. We very much want to provide an event space, a party for mostly it's all over 21. Mostly locals is who we've been promoting to, as well as our friends and friends of friends from Denver and the Front Range, to have a place where it's not just Red Bull, Monster parties that you can't get into and people are all over the streets. This is kind of a safe haven, cool event, community, arts space. We've created a platform for people, visual artists, musicians, performance art, to really have some exposure at a time when the town has a lot of exposure, and we'd like to show the local community what they can do. So we've taken these knowing all these precautions, like how are people going to get away from the ABC and not be running around there late at night, is we have these shuttles. We've put on our promotions no parking, and we very much are pushing, how to get there on bus, how to get out, and then we have extra shuttles to take care of that.
What time are you going to begin and what time are you going to end?
9 to 2.
Okay, and excuse me, I should have had you introduce yourselves. I presume one of you is Joey Stokes, but for the record, could you each introduce yourselves so we'll know?
Want to introduce each other?
No, yourself to us.
I'm Joey Stokes.
Okay.
I'm Ruben Sadowski.
Okay.
We are also known as Chick Voice and Bass. We will be performing at the party if you guys would like to come. Let us know.
Okay.
The event name is also, it's called the Super Dope Semi-Secret Dance Party you can probably get into.
Okay, so just so I'm clear on the event, you're actually going to be also transporting people from Buttermilk to the
Not
Aspen
from
Beer Works?
Buttermilk,
Or from where? Okay, but you have a bus that you transport them, so they're not drinking and driving?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's very much in line with the nonprofit that signed on with us. They were
Okay.
very happy about that, and they're going to have a space there to, educate people on what they do and how they can become involved and that sort of thing.
Okay, just a second, Rachel. Question for Jeanette, probably. Has the Aspen Brewery facility been used for, do they typically have tasting or something? Do they have a liquor license for serving there on their location?
No, they do not have a liquor license.
So they just use that for the brewing?
Yeah.
And so this has not
Called
been
a
used for
wholesale.
any
Yeah. and I-
event before on this location?
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
they have what is called a wholesaler's liquor license, which is issued through the state of Colorado. And the state of Colorado approved these folks to do this.
How many restrooms do you have?
We have, basically we have one outside, and then we're also planning on having 2 temporary.
That just...
One outside. We have
Or
2
one inside. and
porta
then-
potties.
Yeah.
And then we have one inside that's more for the VIP section. So we have 2. That is what when we talked to the waste management companies, that's what they rated us for a party of that length of time. It is getting serviced on Saturday, so there's
It just, for a group of 300 people potentially drinking beer, I'm not so sure that's going to be adequate. I just, similar to George's comment that this is coming so close to the actual event, I sure don't want to be kiboshing it, but I really wish there was more of an operational plan. Are you going to have people out there assuring that there's no parking? Who's going to be crowd safety outside of your facility?
We have hired security. We have 4 security guards per night. Plus, when we do these events, we do them with a rather large group of friends who, many of which are sober, just from the nature of how they like to party. And we will be facilitating that, especially at the beginning, to make sure people aren't parking around there. We've talked to many of the neighbors, so they know what's going on. We will have the brewery space kind of sectioned off so people don't think that's a place that they can pull in. Also on our social media, we've really pushed that, like, here's the buses, here's bus to show, do not drive here. It's not that kind of thing. We do apologize about how close this came. It was a matter of, we did start with local nonprofit, or more local nonprofits, but we kept running up against these tax, they were late or different things hurting their tax forms. So Bus to Show, we felt like was in line with our goals with this party. One of the messages we're trying to send, like, hey, yeah, we have drinks here, but don't drink and drive. And we have like Guayaki Yerba Mate is sponsoring the party. We have lots of other options for people besides drinking.
So you will be serving food?
Yeah, we will have food behind the bar just because we know that's part of the liquor license. There will also be spirulina balls there, which are really good.
George.
So have you or who's ever going to be serving gone through tips training?
All of the bartenders are.
Yeah, we have hired not professional, but yeah, tips certified bartenders, as well as a bar manager and bar backs that are all tip certified.
Jeanette, how much does a special events liquor license cost?
This one is $200.
$200. Thanks.
No, for 2 days, not 365 days.
And with that said, I heard you all talking earlier, you wondered what liquor license applications, do you want me to tell you what they cost?
Maybe give it to John for the next
Okay,
time.
all right. Got it right here.
I'm just curious, and Lance, you could probably answer this. Would this event require a special use permit that hasn't, or have they actually?
It did. Mike is here to respond to that. He worked on that. If you have any questions.
Okay. And Mike, could you just come from behind the post so the camera can see your face?
Sure. The gentleman applied for a special event permit with Pickens County. We have it processed. We are waiting for this final piece for them to obtain a liquor license before we issue the permit tomorrow. We have sign-offs from all the appropriate agencies who reviewed it. The Sheriff's Office, ComDev. We referred it out to the ABC Homeowners Association, so they were notified of the event. We didn't hear any comments back, and we're primed, staff is primed to issue a permit if the board issues a liquor license.
Okay.
Mike, what would the decibel level coming outside the building be before it violates our sound codes?
You caught me there. I don't know the exact number, but we put it on the permit, and then we give it to the Sheriff's Office so that they know the number, and they have a remote or a decibel recording device so that they can go out to the site and record decibel levels. But if I have to guess, it's around like 65 or 70 at the property line.
Okay, and then that's a 24-hour
Yes.
standard, and it doesn't go. I was just going to say, that's going to be one of the critical components of the success of this event, is not having neighbors calling our sheriff's office to complain about the noise of the bands or the music.
And we also have decibel meters as well, and that's something we've been
They're gonna track it.
and we're creating a plan for how this is all going to work.
Okay.
We also did take the time to check in with the neighbors who are within like an area where they would be affected by or heard it, and they are all on board for it. They're even excited to see how it goes because they'd like to see, what that space can be used for. Not that we're planning to do this all the time, but it is, we're excited to be exploring new venues in general and doing it the right way, working with you guys to do it on board.
George.
So if I were to come, I would purchase a ticket, and would I get a band around my wrist, and would I be allowed to go in and come out and go back and forth, or?
We are. That is one of the ways that we have been mitigating kind of one of our biggest concerns in all of this is having, too many people show up that we can host. And so we have been selling tickets, basically, and we're almost reaching a point where they are sold out. So that in the next day or so, we're going to tell people if you don't have a ticket, you can't come, and just put that message out pretty strong. And then, once you get to the door, you're ideally checked, get a wristband, and then we're not really planning on doing re-entry. We have kind of a section outside that will be roped off for people to go outside and, get out for a minute. But as far as like if you have to leave, no re-entry.
We have one security guard who's specifically kind of watching over that, just the exit to the small smoking area that we have, a 10-4 here. No, not that. So we just have a small area outside where there will be smoking, and then right back in. It'll be kind of roped off, small area. We're hoping there won't be that much smoking.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Are there any members of the audience who would like to make a comment about this application? Okay, seeing none, I close the public hearing. Would entertain a motion from the board.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, just to follow up on Rachel's question or recommendation in terms of perhaps what would be sort of a normal proportion in terms of people to restroom facilities, porta potties? If you're expecting 300, Mike, maybe you have a standard that ComDev uses?
We do. Environmental Health has the standard, and they have indoor facilities at the on-site too. And what was it, one additional porta
One
potty?
indoor and then 2 additional.
Yeah. I'll check the standards, George, and make sure that they comply with that many number of participants. And if we need to up the number of porta potties, we'll put that in the permit.
Okay, great.
Yeah, just, I would really strongly recommend that. You know, it's a better safe than sorry situation. You have a clog on that indoor plumbing, and you guys are going to be toast. And, you know, let alone your guest comfort and things like that.
Okay.
And most special events we see kind of end at 10 o'clock. They don't go till 2, you know, so that's a big difference I think you see here. Most are fundraisers start at 6, end at 10. It's much longer later. Okay.
Okay.
One last question. It reminds me. So you've got, as you said, locals, and you got friends coming, and who knows where they're staying. So when you go bus to show, I mean, at 2 o'clock, if someone is traveling down Valley or somewhere else, how are you dealing with that?
As the, we'll kind of be the MCs of the party and making announcements throughout. We will definitely let people know, like, hey, it's 1 o'clock. If you're going down Valley, it's time to get, you know, think about getting on one of the buses down Valley. There's a ton of bus service going on right now. This is kind of just to make sure that the people who need to get downtown can. We also may, if people are asking us about parking, we'll let them know about, I guess there's probably overflow parking at Brush Creek, right, during this X Games time?
You know, it's likely to be very full, so I don't know. That's
Okay, well, but they are the same X Games participants that we expect to have. We will help people get down there. If people are down, I mean, yeah, that's definitely something we've thought about. The same as the bars in Aspen. We don't want anybody driving drunk, and so that's why we have these precautions. If we have to go above and beyond, we'll have extra sober drivers too. We will. That's a big goal of ours, is to absolutely have no backlash from this because somebody drove drunk.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Well, good luck on your event. I would like to hear a post report, you know, after the event, and just see how it went. If you would mind
Sure, yeah.
dropping a memo to us, I'd be
Keen
curious.
Too, so yeah, we're definitely using this as a space to kind of show what we can do and how we can do it. And use it to work with everybody and try to
Should be a good time.
Yeah, it'll be a great time. We hope to do this in the future, and we really do appreciate how helpful Jeanette and Mike and everyone we worked with has been as we figure out these different bureaucratic groups to. It's all good. It's good.
Okay.
And we'll make a video too, so we'll show you that. There's going to be some amazing art out there.
All right, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette. Okay, next we have a consent public hearing, second reading, resolution authorizing the intergovernmental agreement authorizing a GOCO grant agreement for the Glacier Ranch. Dale.
Thanks, Steve. I do have a map of the property. I could project that in the interest of time. Maybe we'll just get through this second reading on proposed agreement with Great Outdoors Colorado regarding the grant reimbursement for the purchase of the Glacier Ranch. The Glacier project has really captivated a lot of people. It's been interesting to watch that. Of course, it was celebrated at your recent meeting with the Eagle County Commissioners. But I continue to get a lot of people expressing interest in that property and the management plan that we will be working on going forward. Most recently in your interview with an applicant for the Open Space Board yesterday. So we're pretty thrilled to have acquired it, and we'd love to get this this contribution from the state Great Outdoors Colorado program to us. Again, this is to partially reimburse us for the purchase price, and the grant award is split with Eagle County, as was the purchase price of the property. I didn't have a little bird tell me this morning that there was a typo in my resolution. The first paragraph said the property is approximately 37 acres. In fact, it's approximately 137 acres, so I've corrected that in the resolution that I have copied and that I can give to the clerk. So with that, I would recommend that you approve.
Make a motion to approve?
I'll second for discussion's sake. I prefer a motion after the public hearing.
Okay, and this is a public hearing. Are there any members of the audience who would like to comment on this IGA to purchase the Glacier Ranch in Emma? Okay, seeing none, I close the public hearing.
All right.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Michael?
Yeah, since I haven't been in favor of this purchase in the first place, I'm not going to support it.
A quick question for Dale. This is a partnership with GOCO and Eagle County, and with the purchase of a property adjoining Pickens County, but not in Pickens County. How many other purchases or other examples that GOCO has participated with Pickens County on purchases outside Pickens County? I could think of Crystal River Bike Trail. Were they involved in that?
Grange.
Jerome Park was a big one. Of course, the adjacent property, the Salt Stall, now Red Ridge Ranch open space.
So to me, it just reinforces the value of partnerships to be able to gain GOCO support for these acquisitions that benefits the entire valley.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you, Dale.
Thanks.
Next, we have a confirmatory reading and public hearing on an emergency ordinance establishing a temporary moratorium to suspend the issuance of all new licenses pertaining to medical marijuana. Staff member is John.
This matter was adopted and became effective on January 7 of this year, pursuant to the Home Rule Charter. When the board makes an emergency ordinance effective, it should be set for a public hearing to allow public comment and consideration of the board to confirm the moratorium as originally passed or to reject it. So that's what this matter is scheduled for today.
Board comments right now? This is a public hearing. Are there members of the audience who would wish to make a comment on this? Okay, could you stand up and please state your name for the record?
Of course. My name is Lauren Mayton. I am an attorney. As you probably all know, I'm on the board of directors of Colorado NORML, and I represent a lot of Valley marijuana businesses, whether they are medical or medical hoping to be retail, etc. Sorry. I've read your moratorium, the language, and I've listened to a lot of discussion. I try to make myself available for all of the meetings for which you discuss this. I can tell you that I don't see the need for the moratorium. I don't see based on my knowledge of what's been going on with Pickens County, is that all licenses are 1 year vested. Okay, so there is no possibility for somebody to really get too far into this business where they are in Pickens County in general. So what is the need for the moratorium? I understand that the theory is to get it in line with the retail. Well, that will happen. I don't see that it's not going to happen because I've listened to you, and that will happen. I respect that, and I think that's a great thing. However, what is the purpose to stop the business now when they're only a 1-year vested anyway, and they'll have to abide by your rules anyway? So I just don't see the purpose or the necessity for such a moratorium. It's just my 2 cents. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? State your name, please.
Hi, I'm Linda Wog, and I just think the moratorium for the licensing is a wise thing to do.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Any other public comments?
I'm Marty Schwarber. I also think that taking the time and agreeing to the moratorium is very important for Pickens County. I think that to rush ahead is not a wise decision, so I do back the moratorium.
Okay, thank you, Marty. Are there any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, I close the public hearing, bring it back to the board.
Move to approve?
I'll second it for discussion's sake. Discussion, Rachel.
I have a question for John Ely. Rob is out of town at this time. Is there any possibility for a continuance on a confirmatory second reading?
That is not particularly dealt with by the Home Rule Charter. It is implicit within the charter that the confirmatory reading be held within a reasonably short period of time.
Yeah.
I think that if the board wants to continue it until all 5 members are present, which I think is in 3 weeks, the next regular meeting, I think we can do that.
Okay, I just want to know that for a factual basis. I think the board knows I did vote against this last time. I do not find it necessary, and if we set that issue of marijuana over here to the side for a second, entering into moratorium is a very serious step in my mind. It's something communities do very rarely. It tends to heighten political tensions on either side. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? What's going to be the outcome? I've seen moratoria in the city of Aspen certainly create the same sort of backlash. And I think that we've been proceeding apace at a kind of calm and normal process for developing our regulations. So I just do not feel that a moratorium by its very nature is needed by the board. I understand that others have a different point of view. And then, going back to the marijuana issue, I think that the discretion to approve or deny licenses as it sits with the board currently for recreational and as it will for medical marijuana, and the approval of any special conditions. I know I am, and I believe the board is listening to the neighbors and folks with a concern, and so I think that we can deal with those issues appropriately without having the umbrella of a moratorium. But those are just my thoughts on this.
George.
Yeah, one of the reasons I support this is, well, 2 reasons. One is because it will dovetail more closely with the retail marijuana regulations, so it's a very smooth transition. But more importantly is currently for an applicant for a medical marijuana license, it's an administrative process, which means that there doesn't have to be public notice, there doesn't have to be any public input. and there's no discussion amongst the BOCC. And I've always felt that that was a mistake, given this new this new field. And so this will allow a short period of time until the board approves the retail regulations to be able to have the similar process for anyone wishing to apply for medical, that it is a public process and there is public input. And so that's why I think it's important to have this at this time. And I should just note that this does not affect any pending applications currently.
John, at this time, there is one pending application and no new applicants have come forward with an application for, and
Not to my knowledge. They don't come into the attorney's office, so I hear about it afterwards.
And this did actually take effect on first reading, so no new applications would be accepted anyhow. The confirmatory reading maintains that status.
So, question for John then. If perhaps, given Rachel's question, we had to have a split vote on this, what happens? Do we
Majority would control.
the majority from the original would control?
No, majority from today's confirmatory reading vote.
But what if it's a split? There's only 4 people.
Then there's no action, and we would by necessity have to continue it over. So
Okay.
there's a
All right, great.
full board.
All right, thanks.
Wouldn't there have to be a motion to continue it, though? I mean, if the motion to approve it fails, is it still possible then to make a motion to continue?
Yeah.
and that would be...
If that fails, then...
Then it's dead.
Then the moratorium is over.
Okay, and it was Rob Ittner who brought up the original idea, and he's not present today, so...
Let's see where the vote goes.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oppose? I would entertain a motion to continue it until Rob is here.
No, we don't need to continue
Or-
it now. It's done. It was upheld.
No?
Didn't everyone vote to approve it?
No.
Oh, I thought I heard...
voted no.
You voted no on the moratorium?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's 2 to
So,
I'm sorry, I just...
go ahead, Steve.
Well, I would entertain a motion to continue until Rob is back and we could look at it with a full board.
The date certain would be?
February 12th.
February 12th?
I will second that.
I was entertaining a motion. Do you want to move?
I would approve that motion.
Okay.
Or you would make that motion?
I will make that motion. I will approve that motion.
Do we have a
Vote for that
second?
motion.
Do we have a second to continue until February 12th?
I will second the motion to continue.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye?
No.
Opposed? Did you say no?
I-
Yes.
No, I do not want to continue.
Okay, and you say no? Okay, the motion fails. So the moratorium fails.
Concludes.
Okay. So we have nothing further to discuss on it right at the moment, or
Okay.
period.
I would make a motion to reconsider the recent decision, to revisit. I think Robert's Rules of Order allows you to make a motion.
You can make a motion to reconsider which of the 2 votes are you making?
Oh, actually, I cannot make a motion to reconsider because I had voted no. Someone who voted in the affirmative has to make that motion.
I'll make a motion to reconsider.
And I believe I can second.
Yes, but I'm not clear which motion is being reconsidered.
I'll reconsider to continue
To continue.
until February 12th,
Okay.
to allow full board to be able to participate in this
Yes.
decision.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I-
you seconded?
I second that.
That's fine. So
Yeah.
now there's a motion and a second on the reconsideration of the previous vote on the continuing of this matter to February 12th.
On the continuing or on the?
On the continuing.
On the continuance.
But we would take it up again on
February 12th.
February
Well,
12th.
if this
On
passes.
whether to continue it till February 12th?
No, to hear this on February 12th.
Or to hear
this
the-
confirmation hearing on February 12th.
To hear the whole issue again?
Well, to hear the confirmation of an emergency ordinance.
Okay. George?
Yeah, it's been not a written policy, but I think a policy, a respectful policy of this board to, when there's important issues that come before the board, to make sure that all those who wish to are able to be present to vote. And in this case, this initial ordinance was proposed by Commissioner Ittner. He's out of town now, so in respect to Commissioner Ittner and in our policies respecting each other, I would hope that this board would vote to continue.
Vote to reconsider it when?
Right now. You have to reconsider whether.
Oh,
you have
to
vote
reconsider it right now whether to?
to continue.
Okay.
Sorry to confuse
I'm understanding
everyone.
now, we're going to reconsider it right now, not on February 12th when
Correct.
Commissioner Ittner is present.
Yes.
Okay, Rachel?
Yeah, my mistake for taking a recent Robert's Rules of Orders training class and of those types of motions. As I said, I am personally opposed to moratorium. I do not think it's necessary. And I was under the impression that even with Rob absent, it was going to pass because Michael had voted twice in favor of the moratorium. And I do not want to deny Rob that opportunity to vote on it or for it to be continued out of respect for the board. And so that's why I was under the impression it would be a 3-1. And again, it's not something I personally support, but I do think that it's important that Rob have an opportunity to vote on this. So I will vote in the favor of this motion to reconsider, but the motion to reconsider has to pass first, and then someone has to make a new motion to continue.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's the process. We have to agree to reconsider.
So all in favor to reconsider the motion to continue, say aye.
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 Okay,
Not opposed?
I will make a motion to continue this until February 12th at our next regular BOCC meeting.
I will second this.
Okay, any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Good.
All in favor? Okay, thank you.
So, for clarification, the moratorium that was adopted on January 7th went into effect immediately. It remained in effect until today, when that moratorium could be considered and confirmed. That consideration and confirmation has been continued until February 12th. Until that day, the moratorium is still in effect and will be enforced by the county. And on that day, the board will vote to whether or not to confirm that moratorium. If the board votes to confirm it, it will continue by its terms. And if the board does not vote to confirm it on that date, then it will expire and be concluded. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Now I think we can
Okay,
perhaps...
we are up to the time of land use public hearings, and Board, how many minutes of break do you want right now? 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
15?
15 minutes? Okay, we will take a 15-minute break. The first applicants can be setting up for your presentation, and we will start at 2:34.
Yeah, I brought some of these.